This video is part 2 of a 3-video series reviewing and ranking every Destiny 2 exotic weapon into a tier list for PvP. The previous video covered all of the weapons that require primary ammo such as auto rifles and hand cannons, and you can find that video on screen here as well as in the description. This video will cover all of the weapons that require special ammo like sniper rifles and shotguns, and the final video in the series will cover all of the heavy weapons. I'll link to that one in the description as well as soon as it's ready for you to check out. Before we get into the rankings, let's quickly discuss the ground rules for how I decided where each weapon should be placed. First off, these rankings are from the point of view of a PC player using mouse and keyboard as my primary input device. I'll try to make notes where using a controller may influence the decision otherwise, but the final ranking on this list will be considering mouse and keyboard use. Second, these rankings are specifically looking at how useful these weapons are for use in PvP. Some of these are excellent PvE weapons, but that's not what we're evaluating today. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's get into the tier list. By the way, the background footage from this video was mostly captured during my live streams over on Twitch. You can watch me live over at twitch.tv/pattycakespc. I'm going to list these weapons in the order that they show up in collections in-game, starting with the kinetic weapons. So our first weapon to cover is the Chaperone. The Chaperone's main exotic perk is the Roadborne. Precision kills briefly grant bonus handling, range, and precision damage with this weapon. The Chaperone is a slug shotgun with incredible range. It's one of my favorite weapons in all of Destiny, and I think it's a contender for the best shotgun in the whole game. At base, it can get a one-hit kill headshot from around 12 meters, and with the Roadborne perk active, it can kill from about 14 meters. If you want to get even crazier, you can pair it with a Lunafaction boots on a Warlock to get that kill distance up to about 25 meters. While the Roadborne is active, you also get a boost to your rate of fire, which allows you to go on some incredible kill sprees. The Chaperone faces two main downsides in my opinion. The first is that since it's a slug shotgun, it can be pretty hard to get that one-hit kill headshot in extremely close range against fast-moving enemies. At that range, you'd probably be better off with something like an Astral Horizon shotgun from Trials of Osiris. The second is that it lacks a mod slot to be able to use an Icarus grip, and the in-air accuracy is not all that great, so sometimes you can feel a little bit pinned to the ground while using it. I actually made a video a while back with a bunch of tips on how to get the most out of this exotic shotgun. I'll link it for you here on screen as well as in the description. Overall, I think Chaperone deserves a top spot in the S tier. Next up is Izanagi's Burden. Izanagi's Burden has a main exotic perk called Honed Edge. Consume the magazine and load a round with additional range and damage. Izanagi is an interesting weapon to rank because it has essentially two main use cases. As a normal sniper, I think it's pretty average. It has a zoom set of 45, which is on the lower side but not quite as low as some of those 35 and 40 zoom snipers that I tend to prefer. It also has the perk No Distractions, which helps you battle flinch after scoping in for a short time, and it has a decent aim assist stat at 62. But the big thing holding it back compared to other snipers is the zoom speed. It doesn't have either snapshot or quick draw, so if you want to improve the zoom speed, you're going to have to use things like sniper targeting mods or pair it with an exotic armor like the Dragon Shadow on a Hunter or Ophidian Aspects on a Warlock. The real magic of Izanagi's happens when you load that souped up bullet with Honed Edge. With a 4x body shot, you can take out any normal health guardian, and you can also take out any super with a headshot. The ability to take out supers or get an opening pick with a body shot makes this a potentially very scary weapon to face in a mode like Trials of Osiris, where your life is much more valuable. However, most of the time, I'd prefer to have a legendary sniper with a great role like the Beloved. I'm going to put Izanagi's Burden in the A tier. Arbalest's main exotic perk is Compounding Force. Fires slugs that cause massive damage to elemental shields of enemy combatants. Arbalest is a fun weapon that sits somewhere in between a sniper rifle and a fusion rifle with how it plays. Its main drawback is that you have to charge the gun to fire each shot. This can put you in a lot of danger when playing against good snipers. The upside though of Arbalest is that you get a lot of aim assist. It feels very forgiving to shoot. It also has a low zoom stat of only 25, which means that you can be aiming down sights while charging your shot and still have a pretty good sense of peripheral vision to see threats. Its high damage will allow you to kill most if not all supers with a headshot, and it even deals 166 body shot damage to normal guardians, making them a very easy cleanup kill. Pairing the Arbalest with the Way of the Wraith Middle Tree Void Hunter also makes for some really interesting plays. Crouching and getting a headshot kill with this tree allows you to gain temporary wall hacks, which means that you can pre-charge your Arbalest when you see enemies coming around a corner. This essentially mitigates the largest drawback of Arbalest and makes it incredibly lethal. I'm going to put Arbalest in the A tier. Bastion's main exotic perk is Saint's Fists, charged to fire 3 spreads of kinetic slugs. Bastion is another interesting hybrid weapon that sits somewhere in between a shotgun and a fusion rifle. It reminds me of a fully automatic shotgun from a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty, except that it has that charge up time. Bastion fires 3 kinetic spreads of pellets that have a very consistent spread pattern. This makes it feel reliable to use, which is something you can't say about many spread fire shotguns in Destiny. Each shot is strong enough to take out a Guardian by itself, so theoretically, if you timed it perfectly, you can get 3 kills with each volley. In practice though, that seems pretty unlikely to happen. However, if you concentrate all 3 shots on a single target, it has great range and lethality compared to a typical shotgun. I was able to get kills with this weapon about 16 meters out while we were testing. It also absolutely melts supers. You can pretty consistently take out any roaming super in the game if you're able to time your shots properly. However, the charge time does hold it back a bit at the highest levels of play, since a good player will likely not be in a position allowing you to perform a full charge. I'm going to put Bastion in the A tier. It's a great option and very fun to use, but I still think you're probably better off with a regular shotgun for high level play. Witherhoard has 2 main exotic perks. The first is Primeval's Torment. Projectiles fired by this weapon blight the target or nearby area on impact. It also has Break the Bank. Blighted targets take damage over time, and blight the nearby area on death. I think Witherhoard is one of the most interesting weapons that Bungie has created for Destiny 2. It plays more like a Molotov from a game like CSGO compared to a normal grenade launcher. If you hit a target directly, you have a guaranteed kill. That includes any moving super in the game. However, the projectile moves very slowly, so you'll need to lead your target quite a bit if they're on the move. Overall though, I don't think that going for the direct shot is the best way to use this weapon most of the time. Instead, I like to use it for area denial, just like you'd use a Molotov in a tactical FPS game. You can use it to clear out areas that you don't have a direct line of sight on by bouncing it off of walls. This flushes out enemies hiding in those spots and gives you a leg up in that 1v1 situation. The blighted pool ticks for 40 damage for each hit, so if an enemy doesn't move out of the blighted area, they'll die really quickly. I'm going to put Witherhoard in the B tier. It's a really fun weapon to use, but probably not worth picking over some of the more competitive options for high level play. Next up, we have all of the exotic trace rifles. Since these all work in a similar fashion, I'm going to cover each of them before moving on to other weapon types. First up is Coldheart. Coldheart has 2 main perks. The first is Cold Fusion. This weapon shoots a steady cold fusion powered laser. This pairs with its other perk, Longest Winter. Coldheart's laser does exponentially more damage the longer it remains on target. So Coldheart has a unique feature compared to other exotic trace rifles, where it ramps up the damage when you're able to string together consecutive hits. However, in PvP this isn't going to be meaningful damage all that often unless you're facing enemies with just terrible movement or your tracking aim is godlike. In PvP, Coldheart starts at 17 damage for a headshot and ramps up into the 20s if you can transfer that damage to multiple targets. But as soon as you start missing your shots, it's going to revert back to 17. The main issue I have with these trace rifles in general is that they require special ammo, but only have an optimal time to kill that's pretty similar to primary ammo auto rifles. And to add to that problem, the ammo economy of special ammo for these really hurts. You'll often just barely get enough for another kill when you do pick up a special brick. Aside from being fun to use, I don't really see a big reason to use this gun in PvP. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Prometheus Lens also has 2 exotic perks. The first is Prismatic Inferno. Fires a solar trace beam and generates a damaging heat field that grows while the weapon continues to fire. This works in tandem with Flame Refraction. Kills with this weapon return a fraction of the ammo used to the magazines from reserves, extending the beam's duration. Prometheus Lens tends to struggle from the same issues as Coldheart. It's a trace rifle that has a time to kill that's competitive with auto rifles, but it requires special ammo to fire. Headshots deal 15 damage with an additional burn component that ticks for 6 damage. The upside though is that Prometheus's damaging heat field can do AoE damage while you're keeping that damage flowing. So theoretically, if you can deal some bonus damage to nearby enemies, it can make getting multi-kills a little bit faster. In practice though, I don't think that this ends up being all that useful in PvP, since it requires quite a bit of ammo in order for that heat field to grow large enough to be significant. I'm going to put this right next to Coldheart in the C tier. Wavesplitter also has 2 perks that work together. The first is Harmonic Laser. Laser damage has 3 power levels that oscillate while the trigger is held down. The other perk is Supercharged Battery. Collecting an orb of light grants a short period of maximum power that starts with an automatic reload. I've always thought that Wavesplitter was one of the cooler exotic weapons in Destiny 2. It has 3 power levels that oscillate while firing. At the lowest power level, it deals 17 damage per headshot, at middle power it deals 18 damage, and at max power it deals 19 damage. By the way, you can see which power level it's firing at based on the number of lines on the oscilloscope on the back of the weapon. It's pretty cool. When picking up an orb to force that max power level, the extra damage is slightly noticeable but not really a total game changer for PvP. At best, it requires maybe 1 or 2 less hits depending on the resilience level. That said though, it's really fun to use and I really do enjoy using it just for laughs. I'm going to put the Wavesplitter in C tier as well. Next up is the newest exotic weapon in the list, and certainly one of the most unique and interesting weapons that Bungie has ever created. That is Ruinous Effigy. It has two exotic perks that work together. The first is Transmutation. Final blows with this weapon collapse victims into void transmutation spheres. The other perk is Evolution. Transmutation spheres you create can be picked up and wielded as weapons by you or your allies. So you can use these void spheres here to light attack, heavy attack with a slam, or just to guard, which creates a bubble around you that slowly damages enemies, and it also prevents you from taking critical hits. The base weapon performance is pretty similar to other trace rifles, where it deals 17 damage per headshot. However, if you do get a kill and turn your enemy into one of those void spheres, the sphere can one-shot opponents with a heavy slam. It can also kill with light attack hits, but it requires 2 swings for a kill. Running around the map with the sphere can be a pretty good distraction to allow your team to make plays, since you're very difficult to kill, but otherwise I don't think it adds a whole lot of value outside of just being really fun to use. I'm going to put Ruinous in the C tier. And finally we have Divinity. Like the other trace rifles, it also has 2 main perks. The first is Judgment. Sustained damage with this weapon envelops the target in a field that weakens and disrupts them. It also has Penance. Targets under the effect of Judgment long enough are struck with a burst of damage. Divinity is interesting in PvP because it does help your teammates hit those critical shots if you are able to tag the target, but it also deals a very low amount of damage by itself. It has a painfully slow optimal time to kill of 1.13 seconds for headshots, which is much slower than the other trace rifles. I think the only practical application of this effect is to work with your team to take down supers, which is a really cool idea in theory, but in reality I don't think it's worth losing out on a much better weapon for 90% of the game just because this one makes supers a little bit easier to kill. If it has any saving grace for solo play, it's that you can use it to paint a crit spot on a target and then quickly switch to a weapon like the Redrick's Broadsword to get a guaranteed crit shot and proc that Desperado. But that's a pretty niche use of this. I'm going to rank this one in the lowest tier, D tier. Just for fun, here's a clip comparing all of the time to kill for the 5 trace rifles next to each other. Watch how much slower Divinity kills compared to the rest of them. Merciless has the exotic perk Conserved Momentum. Non-lethal hits with projectiles make this weapon charge faster until its wielder gets a kill. It also has Impetus. Reloading immediately after a kill increases weapon damage for a short time. This damage buff after reloading works effectively like the perk Kill Clip. It increases base damage from around 49 per bolt to 72 per bolt, making it just a 3 bolt kill. I found Merciless to be a really solid fusion rifle, one of the more consistent options in the game, especially with that exotic catalyst which gives it a massive range and stability buff. The faster charge after getting non-lethal hits is fairly noticeable too. This comes in handy against supers if you have enough time to land those 2 charges. Watch how fast it starts shooting if you stack up those non-lethal hits. I think this weapon's actually a little bit slept on in PvP. It's one of my favorite fusions to bring out whenever I need to get fusion kills for some particular reason. I'm going to rank Merciless in the A tier. It's a solid choice overall, but at the end of the day it is a fusion rifle, and those just aren't super competitive in higher level play right now. So I have trouble going any higher than that. Next up is Borealis. Borealis has 2 exotic perks. The first one is the Fundamentals. Bold Reload to change this weapon's damage type, cycling between Solar, Arc, and Void. It also has Ionic Return. Breaking an enemy's shield transfers 1 bullet from reserves. Breaking a combatant shield, or the shield of a guardian using a super, with that shield's energy type grants a damage bonus for the rest of the magazine. In theory, Borealis is a really cool weapon. If you can break the shield of a super in PvP while matching the ammo type of the weapon, you gain a damage buff for the rest of the magazine. In early Destiny 2, Borealis required heavy ammo, and this damage buff would allow you to body shot kill enemies for the rest of the magazine. I loved watching clips of people pulling this off in PvP. However, today those shots only do 182 damage with Ionic Return active, which isn't enough to kill a player in PvP unless they're already a little bit damaged. On top of that, Borealis doesn't have access to Quick Draw or Snapshot, and the aim down sight speed is pretty slow. I wish the exotic catalyst would provide either of those perks. I'm going to put Borealis in the B tier. It is a high impact sniper after all, which means it can headshot kill supers with just 1 bullet, but I do think there's some better legendary options out there, and also other weapons that can make better use of your exotic slot. Next up is Telesto the Besto. It has 2 exotic perks. The first is Unplanned Reprieve. fusion projectiles attach and detonate with a delayed void blast. It also has Harbinger's Pulse. Multi-kills with this weapon immediately reload your equipped kinetic and energy weapons from reserves. Telesto, everyone's favorite sandbox breaking fusion. In case you're new to the game, Telesto is a fusion rifle that acts much differently than your typical fusion. It fires projectile orbs that either attach to targets or just sit on the floor as proximity traps. These little orbs have been the culprit behind numerous exploits in the game, and I imagine the Bungie devs wake up fearing the next Telesto bug just about every week. In PvP, Telesto can be used in a number of ways. First off, it's a pretty solid fusion rifle if just used traditionally. Against a single target, the one-hit kill range is excellent since the crystals don't experience any damage drop-off. And if you happen to attach the orbs to an enemy who's close enough to another enemy, you can often get a multi-kill with a single volley. If direct hits aren't really your thing, you can also use Telesto to set traps for enemies to walk through. This can be used defensively to block doorways or flanks, or placed on objective points like zones in control or heavy ammo spawns. You can even attach Telesto bolts to a teammate and have them run into the enemy kamikaze style. The creative uses of this gun are pretty endless. The main thing that holds Telesto back is that it is a fusion rifle and those struggle to keep up with snipers and shotguns at the highest levels of play. But it's certainly a really fun weapon to use, and I'd say probably one of the best fusions in the game right now. I'm going to put Telesto in the A tier. Lord of Wolves has two main exotic perks. The first is Shrapnel Launcher. Fires a powerful short-range burst of solar damage. Its alternate fire mode is called Release the Wolves. Hold reload to swap to a longer, more powerful burst. A few seasons ago, Lord of Wolves was a real problem in the Crucible. They received a buff that made the alternate fire Release the Wolves mode incredibly strong, and the only requirement to proc it was to hold reload when you spawned. This had Guardians all over the Crucible mapping each other with ridiculous range while firing all 10 shots in the Release the Wolves mode. Thankfully, Bungie nerfed this alternate fire mode, and now it's much less potent in PvP at range. However, the regular fire mode is still very strong. While testing this, we were able to get a pretty consistent kill around 10 meters, which is 1 to 2 meters further than what even the best legendary spread shotguns are able to pull off. It also still totally melts supers. 2 good volleys of the normal mode will basically melt anything. Although Lord of Wolves isn't nearly as popular as it was a few seasons ago, it's still an incredibly strong option, and I think it belongs up with the Chaperone in the S tier. Jotunn's exotic perk is Charge Shot. Hold down the trigger to charge up a tracking shot that explodes and burns on impact. Jotunn has the most compressed skill gap of any exotic weapon on the list. It's hard to do very poorly with this weapon since it has some incredibly forgiving aim assist, allowing you to snipe targets across the map with basically an auto lock on. At the same time though, it has a lengthy charge up time and it's not really a great candidate for getting multi-kills. It's probably one of the most beginner friendly weapons on this list, and because of that it's pretty popular. But you're not likely to see a bunch of top level players using it. I think this one belongs solidly in the C tier. Next up is Erianna's Vow. It has 2 main exotic perks. The first one is Looks Can Kill. This weapon fires special shield piercing ammunition. It comes with a scope. It also has Death at First Glance. Bonus damage when aiming down sights on the opening shot of an attack. This bonus is preserved if the shot deals precision damage or strikes an elemental shield. Erianna's is somewhat of a hybrid between a sniper rifle and a hand cannon. The high impact shot will deal 164 damage with a critical shot when the perk First Glance is active, and it has some really impressive range too. I believe it's currently bugged where you can always get that damage buff. Even while hip firing, I was able to pull off that 164 damage in testing. This high impact shot creates an opportunity to pair it with another hand cannon to clean up the kill. My favorite way to play this weapon is to use the Hunter Exotic Boots Lucky Pants to quickly switch between weapons and get an accuracy buff while doing it. It's a very fun playstyle. I also made a build video recently where you can use the new Charge with Light mod High Energy Fire to one-shot opponents in PvP. I'll link to that video on screen here as well as in the description. The exotic catalyst also gives you the perk Auto-Loading Holster and gives you a much larger magazine. The downside of Erianna's Vow is that you can't get a one-shot kill under normal circumstances, and you'll often be dueling against sniper rifles that can take you out in just one shot. This is a pretty big limitation in higher level play, but it's still a pretty fun weapon to use. I'm going to put Erianna's Vow in the B tier. And finally we have the exotic shotgun, the Fourth Horseman. It has 2 exotic perks. The first is Thunderer. This weapon's rate of fire is increased significantly and it fires full auto. The other perk is Broadside. Each successive shot has more damage and more spread. The Fourth Horseman is an interesting shotgun in PvP. It has a pretty poor one-hit kill distance of only about 4 to 5 meters for one shot, But if you hold down the trigger and go for full auto, you can extend that distance quite a bit at the expense of eating through all of your ammo very quickly. While firing full auto, you chew through any super in the game lightning fast if you're able to get close enough before dying. However, you're going to need a lot of reserve ammo because this weapon consumes ammo fast. In my time testing the Fourth Horseman for this video, I found it to be pretty fun to use in PvP, but not really a smart choice over most of the top legendary shotguns. I'm going to put this one in the B tier. So that wraps up the list for special weapons. As I mentioned in the intro, the next video in this series will be looking at all of the heavy weapon options in PvP, so be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss that one. These types of videos take a lot of time for me to put together, so if you did enjoy it, a thumbs up rating is greatly appreciated. Also, be sure to follow my Twitch channel if you'd like to see me capture some of this footage live. I stream many nights of the week over at twitch.tv/pattycakespc. And finally, I owe a big shout out to my Discord community for helping me do the testing for this video. If you'd like to join us, there's a link to check it out in the description. That's all for now. Catch you guys next time.